I pray for the safety of all good people who come to Zion. But we can't expect God to do all the work. I have been baptized twice. Once in water, once in flame. I am the right hand of the Lord, and the instrument of his vengeance.
Greetings, it seems like it's been a while. I know I haven't been posting too much in the last month, but forgive me with all the holidays and everything. It's been a little bit busy, but I am finding time to do some new videos. And today I want to discuss Honest Hearts, which is my favorite Fallout DLC. The reasons that this is my favorite aren't exactly what you might think. It's not just, oh, Joshua Graham is so great. I think that there's a lot of really cool religious and just personal significance that comes out of this DLC that I think a lot of people might have missed. And I just want to go ahead and talk about that today. And always remember, if you're not subscribed, please feel free to give this video a like, comment, sub. Of course, you can always click that little bell notification and all that good stuff. If you really like this content and want to see more of it, do that, and it lets me know that you guys are, interested in this kind of thing. And of course, you can always leave a comment. The comments help me figure out exactly what you guys liked or didn't like about the video, so I'd like to see myself improve with that kind of criticism that helps me move forward and make better content for you guys. So without further ado, let's go ahead and move forward. So, Honest Hearts, why is this my favorite Fallout DLC? Of course, you can raise up the points of, oh, well, Mythic, there are so many other good Fallout DLCs, why would you pick this one? This one seems a little bit bare bones, and quite frankly, doesn't even have as much content as the other DLCs did. Well, a part of this may be due to nostalgia. I think a lot of it has to do with the themes and the messages sent in Honest Hearts, and a lot of the controversial topics that the DLC decided to deal with. Namely, this DLC decided to tackle the idea of religion in the post-apocalyptic world, because a lot of people would say, oh, at this point God has abandoned humanity and has pretty much moved on or just forgotten about religion entirely. And I really respect that a post-apocalyptic game, especially my favorite series regarding the post-apocalypse, Fallout, decided to tackle this topic itself. Breaking into that idea, we're going to go ahead and start discussing the characters a little bit. So there's a lot of really cool characters to unpack here. You have everything from Joshua Graham to Daniel, Follows Chalk, Waking Cloud, and then you have the minor characters such as Ricky and the Happy Trails Caravan people who all just blend in really well. Of course, they're just kind of a vehicle to start the whole DLC and get the player to Zion. And I think that even those little characters do have a lot of personality and a lot of really funny things, a lot of cool dialogue, and for characters that they killed off almost immediately, they have a lot of different content dialogue and different skill checks that go into them that are all very nicely done and very well designed. These things include being able to carry more gear with you into the DLC, or even, like you can talk to Ricky and you can get him kicked out of the Happy Trails Caravan Expedition because you realize that his Pip-Boy is actually broken and he essentially just salvaged it or stole it or whatever might have you. So we're going to go ahead and break down the characters because the characters are the ones that essentially make this DLC what it is. So of course we're going to go ahead and start with the kicker. We're going to go ahead and start with Joshua Graham. I know they usually say save the best for last, but believe me, I'm already doing that. So we're going to go ahead and talk about Joshua Graham and break down what exactly I really liked about him and maybe some things that maybe I thought were a little bit eh. So Joshua Graham is a character that gets a lot of respect in the Fallout franchise, and for good reason too, because he's a very well written character and he's one of the coolest characters in the entire Fallout franchise, rivaling even the Master or even Frank Horgan himself. He is one of the most memorable characters pretty much in the entire franchise. And one of the reasons he is so memorable, at least in my opinion, is because he is kind of a Christian character done right. He's not like some zealot or a character that takes Christianity to a point where it's almost a joke, or he's like too into it to where he's like essentially murdering people or taking things too literally. He is a great embodiment of the Christian faith and basically shows that, the Christian faith is about, for a lot of people, it's about hope. It's the idea that, you can, maybe you've had a bad past or a spotty past, but as he says, the path is always there for you to follow. Joshua Graham as a character is about redemption. His entire arc is him becoming obviously the legate, and then when he failed, he was tossed into the Grand Canyon covered in pitch, and he was known as one of the greatest soldiers the Legion had ever employed basically within its own army and military. And the redemption story kind of comes from him being someone that is evil and then realizing his faults, and he became obviously a figurehead within the Dead Horses, who are the more militaristic of the two tribes. And I've always thought it was really beautiful how Joshua Graham was portrayed, and his religion and his faith were always a huge aspect of his life and how he acted. He believed that essentially God had sent the Dead Horses to Zion and him as well for a purpose. He believed that his entire existence and his being there was so that he could basically use his skill set and protect these people. It's not just about, oh, he wants to go killing, he wants to go on the warpath. He believes that he is there to allow people who are essentially innocent, who don't attack people, they don't go out, they don't kill, pillage, whatever have you. These are people that, want to just live and abide in their own way in Zion. Joshua Graham as a character is beautiful because he is a character that is obviously a very combat heavy person. He is someone who's seen a lot of bloodshed in his life, but has sooner basically come to realize that the important things in life aren't killing, aren't victory, aren't battle, that the important things in life are love, forgiveness, and peace is essentially the goal of his character. And that's one thing I always really respected, because even in Fallout, I personally admit there's not many characters that are like this. There are people spread around, but characters that outright just vie for peace and want the ideal of where, you can just live in your own essentially bubble and be peaceful, not harm others, and essentially just kind of work for yourselves and make an area where people can live free of fear and free of basically evil. One thing that I specifically liked are his interactions with the courier. The courier, obviously being born in the wasteland, was not a very Christian person. He didn't really understand or otherwise, follow Christianity, and the way that Joshua Graham explains it to you is actually quite a beautiful thing. He kind of just tells you about it, and he's not forceful in the way that he wants to tell people about Christianity. His way is a lot more passive. His way is that it is his job to inform you about Christianity, tell you, and one of the things he says is like, whether I tell you or not, God still exists, and whether you believe it, whether we don't, we can never be for sure, but those who follow faith are the ones that are essentially going to be, rewarded in the end of life. And the idea that at the end of this dark tunnel, this life that a lot of people are living and suffering through, the idea that there is something greater, that there is a light at the end, a light shining in the darkness, that was something I always found to be really beautiful and really, sentimental to even myself as a Christian. You have a lot of series and a lot of different mediums of entertainment where when they introduce a Christian character, they're just some essentially cult leader or some otherwise bad guy where they use religion as a bad thing. And to see a medium properly introduce a Christian character that preaches actual Christian values was really nice. But of course, you also have his foil, which is Daniel. And one thing I always thought is that a lot of people really didn't like Daniel, and I've kind of seen that just in general from the Fallout community, but I also think that Daniel is equally as valid as Joshua Graham, because Daniel wishes to follow a more true-to-word version of the gospel. He wishes that, and essentially believes that when thou shalt not kill said in the Bible, they mean that indefinitely, that you should avoid killing in conflict at all costs. And that's an equally valid point within Christianity. I mean, if someone says, obviously it says this in the Bible, and, there's no way of really misinterpreting it, but you have to understand from both Joshua's and Daniel's point of view that they are both correct. They both believe in protecting their families, but they both believe in doing it in a different way, which is why Daniel and Joshua Graham don't see eye to eye, but both of them believe that one or the other are good people. And then, of course, you do have a lot of side characters within the Honest Hearts DLC, but most of them pale in comparison when talking about Joshua Graham or Daniel. But even then, you have Waking Cloud as well as Follows Chalk. Both of them are both great, respectively, in my opinion, because I think their stories are both really nice and very well-rounded. I'm going to go ahead and start off with Waking Cloud because that one's the most fresh in my mind. So Waking Cloud has a really nice and very tragic story. Her husband went out after she basically told him not to, and he ended up dying. And this is obviously spoiler warning for 12-year-old DLC now, sorry. But yes, you do figure out that her husband died, and obviously you do have the choice of telling her or lying to her. And essentially, it is pretty much confirmed that telling her is the better cause, because obviously if you lie to her, she essentially just wonders for the rest of her days what exactly happens and then is stricken with grief and has a hard time moving on. But if you tell her, she, has a hard time at first, but at the same time, she is able to overcome her grief and mourn the loss of her husband and move on and eventually marry someone else and live a happy and fulfilling life with that person. Though she still did mourn the loss of her husband, of course, it is much less of a burden on her mind because she knows what happens and she has that closure. And of course, you do have the stark contrast with the character like Follows Chalk, whose main purpose is basically deciding what he wants to do with his life. He is not homebound like Waking Cloud. He believes that, there's a world out there and he wants to see it. Of course, you can dissuade him from doing that, and he will just stay in the canyon with his family and he will do the best he can to take care of his loved ones. And of course, you can tell him as well that he should go see the outside world and essentially, become a traveler, which if you do, he does end up leaving. And of course, in the ending slide, it just says he walks into the wilderness and is never seen again, which in my opinion, I don't really like that because it kind of just implies that he just walked out and died pretty much. But I do believe personally that he would most likely end up making it to civilization and seeing these civilizations that he wished to see when he was talking to the courier. And then, of course, you have my favorite character out of all the Honest Hearts DLC, and he's a character that you don't even actually technically meet throughout the entirety of the DLC, and that is Randall Clark, or as some people like to call him, the Survivalist, or the Father. The Randall Clark journal entries, they hit different. They're one of the best things about the entirety of Fallout New Vegas, in my opinion. The atmospheric storytelling, as well as just the direct storytelling of his life, are honestly worthy of an entire novel. They are very well done and they are written in a way that is just phenomenal to the writing of New Vegas. It follows the lore of Fallout perfectly, and it just shows you how dreadful and how without hope the world can be in the world of the Fallout universe. While all of us may look at it from a distance and see, oh, this is funny, happy Fallout, there's stuff going on, there's just kind of like comedic post-apocalypse, and a lot of people get that impression from the start, and this is one of those journal entries that shows you that that is definitely not the case. So for those of you who don't know, I don't want to just go word by word reading the journal entries, but essentially who Randall Dean Clark was a man who was coming home from a hunting trip in the October of 2077. This is obviously being the month that the bombs dropped. And on his way home, his engine suddenly stopped and all the cars around him stopped. He knew immediately what was happening. The bombs were starting to fall. They were starting to blow up everything around him, and essentially SLC, or Salt Lake City, was being turned into rubble. And it just goes on and tells the story of how this man survived for almost 50 years, I believe, 40, 50 years after the bombs dropped, and his basically tale of what happened to him after he got back to the Zion National Park. And the stories that this tell, they're almost tear-jerking. They're very emotional, and they tell the story, and it's just very sad, especially once you get to the end and he starts talking about his drive to move on, and basically the reason he couldn't commit suicide after all this time alone was because he believed that his memory or his remembrance of his wife and his son was essentially the only life he could give them, and basically out of respect for them, he couldn't see himself killing himself because he would be disrespecting the memory of his wife and children. If he died, their memory would die with him, and it would be almost as if they never existed. And of course, these journal entries are scattered all throughout Zion National Park, so you go in different caves and you can find different terminal entries. This was probably one of my favorite parts of the entire DLC, just because it was like unraveling the mystery of what happened to a man after the bombs dropped. And I think that there isn't too much content out there really talking about the days that the bomb dropped. Obviously, you have the beginning of Fallout 4, which is not really any representation other than you just get to see a nuke go off and you get to see the news report. But in reality, this shows what the following days were like. There were a few terminal entries in Fallout 4 that talked about the days following the bombs dropping, and they were good. They were definitely really nice, but there was nothing really detailed. This was extremely detailed and was essentially almost a small autobiography of this man's life following the bombs dropping. To me, this was something that just none of the other DLCs really offered. They all had great storytelling, but that was kind of just between the courier and the characters involved. I really liked that Honest Hearts also offered a lot of really cool side stories, and offered one of the most beautiful vistas of any Fallout game. It looked incredibly nice. The Zion National Park, seeming almost untouched by the war, was just insane. It looked really cool, and the ideas of all the abandoned buildings and everything just surrounding and littering the entire park was something that I thoroughly enjoyed when exploring this DLC. This, on top of all the biblical references, is what make this my favorite DLC, is because I feel like it doesn't take all the things that are in the usual Fallout games, and the things that made the Fallout 3 DLCs was so insane was because a lot of them were really far out there, or just like completely new areas to explore, which are very nice and very freaky in terms of how they're presented, such as Mothership Zeta or Point Lookout. This DLC took an approach that, was really nice. It was a faraway place that was, more foresty, which I thought was really cool because in the Fallout games, obviously they're not really known for foresty locations, and it took a biblical reference and a biblical type story that I thought was really nice and really well written. The idea of Zion to me was something that was very beautiful. It was something that illustrated that it was a home and a place of peace. It essentially hosted the Sorrows and the Whitelegs, who were essentially fostered from the father, or Randall Dean Clark. And of course you had the invaders being the Whitelegs, who were pretty much close to becoming Legion at this point in the story, and they were essentially invading and looking to take these lands for themselves to prove exactly how powerful they were by essentially killing the man who the Legion feared the most, who was Joshua Graham, and of course you had the battle between him and Salt Upon Wounds. And of course, there's a million different biblical references. I don't have time to cover every single one, but as you can tell, just by even playing through it once, the biblical references are really nice. And it shows that, that Zion is a place of peace, and it is a place where the religious and the innocent can essentially prosper and live without worry of fear. And the idea that they are being invaded by a group that thinks obviously the exact opposite, who are a huge warlike tribe, is very nice, because you have people like Daniel who believe that even in this extreme case, they shouldn't be fighting, they shouldn't be killing. The innocence of the Sorrows and the dead horses should be preserved. And then you have the stark contrast, of course, who is Joshua Graham, who believes that fighting to preserve your peace and preserve your way of life is justifiable when you're doing it for the name of your God, as well as the name of, peace and safety for your people when you have not trespassed against the other people. The people are taking your land, your settlement. So he believes that they are well within their right to fight back and strike with that vengeance of, their beliefs and their ideals, that they belong here and that this is their place of peace, this is their Zion, and they're not going to surrender it. And then, of course, you have Daniel, which, like I said, his point is very equally valid to Joshua Graham's. While people may not have liked his character as much, and his character was a little whiny for my taste, I still do believe that he was well done. He did the job that he was supposed to do, and I do think he's a very well-written character. He shows, a lot of the very true essences of Christianity, where, you don't believe that you should harm other people, and that if you can avoid it by just leaving, that you should do it. And while I don't personally believe over his views over Joshua Graham's, I do believe that, like I keep saying, it is an equally valid opinion and his right as a Christian man to believe and present that idea forward, that these people should not have their innocence corrupted, essentially, and should be moved to a different place rather than forcing them into a conflict that they don't belong in. And a thing that I always thought was very sad is he was kind of right, because if you do go with the Joshua Graham style ending, which pretty much everyone did. The Sorrows do become a more warlike tribe, and he does see this as a failure because the Sorrows are, in fact, essentially the ideal thing that they represent is preserved innocence, and they, you know, all their hunting and gathering is just done for them. They don't kill people, they don't attack people. And Daniel saw that innocence as something that should be preserved, because in a world where everything is filled with darkness, to see a light as the Sorrows, to him, essentially the Sorrows were the light shining in the darkness. They were surrounded by corruption, they were surrounded by evil, and yet they did not succumb to it. They saw themselves as a tribe of people that, you know, should never hurt others unless it's brought onto you. And from their perspective and his perspective, they are essentially a light in the darkness, where they represent this innocence that he believes must be preserved and must be upheld according to his and their own beliefs. And then, of course, you have someone like Joshua Graham who comes in, and his thing is that, yes, Christianity and their values and their innocence should be upheld, but the innocence will get them killed. And if they get killed, it doesn't matter if they're innocent or not. He believes that essentially what Randall Clark believed. He believed that, you know, if you live, you should live in peace, but if people are going to bring problems to your door, you should solve that problem and answer the door with righteous fury, as he said. And I always thought that that was a very interesting plot point within any kind of medium, the idea of, is it okay to strike back when, you know, if you had the opportunity to run, should you just run or should you fight back? To me, it's almost kind of like, it's going to be a really weird comparison, but if you've ever watched Mob Psycho 100, it's kind of like how Reagan talks to Mob and tells him that he shouldn't use his powers on anyone no matter what, and that it's okay to run away because these problems aren't his, and therefore he shouldn't be forced to deal with them because these are the problems of other people. He shouldn't be using himself as a weapon. Instead, he should be focusing on himself and what he wants to do, and he shouldn't be just using his powers as a weapon because he can. Like I said, it's a really weird comparison, but that's kind of how I see it in my head. Is I just really liked the contrast between Daniel and Joshua Graham, and I'm going to kind of go into the problems of the DLC. There are a lot of them. I'm not going to sit here and list every one. It's still my favorite DLC despite the problems, but essentially my biggest one is the fact that if you're doing a Legion playthrough, this DLC basically gives you a big middle finger and tells you to go fuck yourself. And I don't really like that. I get that Joshua Graham was supposed to be like the main character of this DLC. I get that, but the fact that there wasn't even like a side quest line where you could work with Salt Upon Wounds or talk to the Whitelegs, the fact that they were just like generic raiders from Fallout 3 where they just attack you on sight, was incredibly lame. And with every other DLC, it doesn't really matter if you're Legion or NCR unless you're talking about Lonesome Road, but even then it's just dialogue changes, which I really don't like. But we're not going to talk about that right now. And it's, you know, to me, that's really fucking dumb that all it was for a Legion player was, fuck you, go kill Joshua Graham, and then leave Zion and get ending slides that basically just call you an asshole. It's like, wow, sorry, I chose one of the factions that are core to the game and essential to the game. Though, overall with New Vegas, as a Legion playthrough, you can play through all these DLCs technically, but this one is just a huge fuck you if you play through Legion, and that's my biggest criticism of this entire DLC. Like try to go through this DLC and stay true to the Legion ideals, and you can't. You can literally walk in and kill everyone and then immediately leave, and that's the DLC. That's it. It's like, really? Like, what? They couldn't have, like, even if it was like 3 quests where you go and you talk to the Whitelegs maybe after, say, if you like kill Chalk or something like that, or even if it like sensed that you were a Legion player or like you chose Legion or had a certain reputation with Legion, if there was a different way to start the DLC, that would have been immensely better. It could have been something along the lines of a new character being introduced at the camp, and then they tell you about Joshua Graham, and they have this tribe that's basically earning to join into the Legion, and essentially you're being sent to work with them and basically clear out Zion and take what's yours for the Legion. Something like that would have been so cool. I get that there were so much time constraints, but just for it to be a flat fuck you to Legion players, it was not my favorite. not at all. But, you know, that's just one glaring issue. If I were to talk about other DLCs, there's a lot of issues I had with them. The only DLC in my mind that actually pretty much came and went without issue was the Big Mountain or Old World Blues DLC. Old World Blues was essentially perfect in terms of DLCs and the ways that they go. Even from a Fallout lore perspective, they were fucking phenomenal. Old World Blues is, I gotta say, it's like my opinion of the Fallout games. Fallout 1 isn't the best, but it is my favorite. So I will flat out say Old World Blues is a better DLC than Honest Hearts. But at the same time, it's not my favorite. I loved Honest Hearts. I loved the significance behind everything, and I like that it chose to go a more moral route in a way that essentially questioned the faith of the person playing the game. It's, do you believe this idea to be true? Do you believe in the ideas of Christianity? Or, you know, maybe fuck that, I want to go just kill these people. Like, yeah, I like you, Joshua Graham, but, you know, fuck these guys. We don't need them here. Fuck these, you know, kill these guys. Fuck them. Who cares, right? It was all very cool to me, and I just really liked it. It might come from a place of nostalgia because it came out in the summer when I was in, like, middle school, and that's when I played it. So I guess maybe it might be a nostalgia factor too, but I played all the other ones in middle school too, so I don't really think that's the case. But you know, it's been my favorite for the longest time just because there's a lot of cool significance in that, and I think that the idea that it takes of being a more of a thought-provoking DLC rather than just in-your-face Fallout was a really refreshing change of pace to the other DLCs, because the other DLCs are very in your face with their fact that they are a Fallout thing, and it you know, it shows, and I think that's amazing. I love the fact that they're very in your face, they're very Fallout, and they follow the lore almost perfectly. But I think Honest Hearts was literally like the best transition between DLCs, is because you have, you know, all these different factions, all these cool characters, all these people, all this religious and personal and, you know, moral significance that comes out of this DLC that is all very cool, very thought-provoking, and very just fun to watch and very fun to play through. And these are things that I think, you know, make this DLC great, is that it took a road less traveled with this DLC, and that I think that's why it's my favorite one. It's just, there's no other Fallout DLC like it, and I guess I just really like the fact that rather than taking the road of just going with, you know, something like simple, easy, they decided to tackle a challenge that was more moral and made you think and actually had, you know, meaning and deeper thought behind it, rather than just, oh, go take over this place for the courier. And I really enjoyed that. But, you know, maybe you guys didn't. Feel free to leave a comment and tell me exactly what you didn't enjoy about Honest Hearts, or if you really liked it, you know, you can do that too. I'm gonna go ahead and cut the video here because it's starting to get almost a half hour long when I was aiming for like a 10-minute video. But I appreciate you guys watching. There'll definitely be more content in the future, and you know, all that, rate, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Keep it up, guys. I really like the support that I'm seeing. I never thought I'd even get past 100 subs doing this, so it's really heartwarming to see you guys doing that for me. You know, I do want to pay it forward, so you will see a little bit more about that. Actually, I'm probably going to do a thing in the beginning of the video now. I'm just recording and kind of rambling, sorry. Yeah, so I appreciate the watch through, guys. Have a good one. Peace.